Margaret Chen's hands trembled as she smoothed the cream silk blouse, tag still attached, against her body. The mirror in her bedroom reflected a woman she barely recognized, 58 years old, silver threading through black hair she'd worn in the same practical bun for 2 decades, crow's feet mapping every late night spent with grant proposals and literacy curricula. The Tory Burch ensemble hung on her like costume jewelry on a monk. She reached for the scissors, metal cold against her palm, and snipped the tags free. They fell to the hardwood floor with a whisper. Through the window, fog rolled across Riverside's modest streets, the kind of June gloom that made everything look perpetually dawnlit. Her Honda Civic sat in the driveway, its 2012 paint job showing rust near the wheel wells like age spots on aging hands. Margaret had driven that car to Robert's funeral, to Jessica's college graduation, to 1,000 library board meetings where she'd quietly funneled millions into programs that would never bear her name. The car was 13 years old. Her marriage would have been 33. Her phone vibrated against the dresser's surface, the sound sharp in the morning quiet. Jessica, Mom, you're not backing out, right? Confirmation number is in your email. Don't be late. And please wear the outfit I bought you. The Birch one. Not those awful librarian cardigans. Margaret's finger hovered over the keyboard. The polite response formed in her mind, thank you again, sweetheart, I'll be there, but something stopped her. She thought of dinner 3 nights ago. Jessica's phone pointed at her like a weapon, Brandon's uncomfortable shifting in his seat, Marcus's laugh that sounded like their father's before the stroke took him. The way Aunt Patricia had examined her shoes with the clinical detachment of a pathologist studying tissue samples. She typed, I'll be there, the message delivered. 3 dots appeared immediately, then vanished. Jessica never could stand brevity. Margaret set the phone face down and moved to her closet. Past the practical pieces, the cardigans Jessica mocked. The sensible slacks, the floral dresses from Target that had survived dozens of washings. Her hand found the locked filing cabinet tucked in the corner. Her fingers knew the combination by muscle memory. Inside, manila folders organized with the same precision she brought to the library's cataloging system, Chun Rodriguez Foundation operating documents, patent licensing agreements, trust administration, investment portfolio summary. The top sheet showed $47.3 million in assets. Robert's semiconductor patent had done what neither of them expected. They'd planned to donate everything, slowly, quietly, to causes that mattered. Then Robert died and Jessica was 23 and angry about everything Margaret had ever been. She locked the cabinet. The click echoed. In the kitchen, coffee brewed while she spread peanut butter on toast. Through the window above the sink, she watched her neighbor Mrs. Kowalski wrestle a recycling bin to the curb, 82 years old and stubborn as rebar. Margaret had paid off Mrs. Kowalski's mortgage 2 years ago through an anonymous trust. The old woman thought she'd won a church raffle. Sometimes kindness required deception. Her phone rang. David Morrison's name appeared on the screen. She answered. You're up early, city budget meetings wait for no one. His voice carried warmth even through digital compression. I wanted to catch you before your spa day. Jessica told the mayor's wife about it at the fundraiser last week. Apparently it's quite the mother-daughter bonding experience. Margaret felt something twist in her chest. Jessica talks about me at fundraisers. She's very proud of treating you. Made sure everyone knew it cost $2,500. David paused. Though between us, I've never understood the appeal of strangers touching your feet for money. I'll let you know Monday about that. Another pause, longer this time. The coffee invitation. Does it still stand? After your family thing, Margaret looked at her reflection in the kitchen window, ghosted against the morning fog. Why would you want coffee with a librarian who drives a rusted Civic? Because that librarian quoted Neruda at a budget meeting and made me remember why I got into public service instead of private sector consulting. His voice softened. And because when you talk about literacy programs, your whole face changes. You look like someone who knows exactly what matters. Heat crept up Margaret's neck. She was 58 years old and blushing like a teenager. Tuesday. 7 o'clock. The cafe on Riverside and Oak. I'll be there at 6:45, she hung up smiling, then caught herself. 15 years was a long time to forget how this felt, the flutter, the anticipation, the dangerous optimism that maybe life wasn't finished surprising her. The toast had gone cold. She ate it anyway. At 9:30, Margaret backed the Civic out of her driveway. The engine made a sound like distant thunder. A rattle Robert had promised to fix the week before his heart attack. She'd kept the car running through sheer stubbornness and regular maintenance at Pedro's garage on 5th Street. Pedro charged her $20 for oil changes that should cost $80. She paid him back by tutoring his daughter through AP English. The drive to Serenity Heights took 40 minutes through Saturday traffic. Margaret listened to NPR, a story about literacy rates in immigrant communities, and thought about Carlos reading Charlotte's Web to his daughter. He'd cried describing it, this 45-year-old man who'd spent 3 decades ashamed of the words he couldn't decipher. Last week he'd read the chapter about Charlotte's death. Then told Margaret he finally understood why his daughter loved books. Serenity Heights occupied what had been a tech executive's estate before the last market correction. Stone walls, manicured gardens, a circular driveway where a valet in white linen waited beside a podium. Margaret pulled up in the Civic. The valet's expression flickered, surprise, maybe pity, before professional neutrality settled over his features like a mask. Welcome to Serenity Heights. Do you have a reservation, Chen? 10 o'clock, he tapped a tablet, frowned, tapped again. 1 moment please, Margaret waited. Through the spa's glass doors she could see marble floors, orchids in crystal vases, women in plush robes moving like ghosts through eucalyptus-scented air. Everything whispered money the way libraries whispered knowledge. The valet returned with a woman in her 40s, sleek black dress, expression professionally apologetic. Mrs. Chen? I'm Simone, the reservations manager. I'm afraid there's been some confusion. Margaret's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Confusion? We don't have a reservation under your name. Not for today, not for any day this month. Simone's voice carried studied sympathy. Sometimes these booking platforms have glitches. If you'd like to make an appointment now, our next availability is August. The world tilted slightly. Margaret heard herself say, my daughter made the reservation. Jessica Chen Whitmore. Recognition sparked in Simone's eyes. Mrs. Whitmore is one of our valued clients. Let me check her account. More tapping. I see a reservation was made 6 weeks ago under your name, but it was cancelled 3 weeks ago. The deposit was refunded to Mrs. Whitmore's credit card 3 weeks ago. The same week as the dinner. The same night Jessica had filmed her, performing charity for her Instagram followers. Margaret's voice came out steady. I understand. Thank you for checking. She put the car in drive. Simone stepped back, still wearing that professional sympathy-like armor. Through the rearview mirror, Margaret watched the valet and the manager exchange a glance. They'd tell the story later. Probably. The confused old woman in the rusted car turned away at the gates. She pulled onto the main road and drove 3 blocks before pulling into a grocery store parking lot. Her hands were shaking again. Not from anger. Anger was clean, simple, something you could process and release. This felt like geology, layers of old hurts compressing into something dense and immovable. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Jessica, how's the spa? Take pics, Jessica. Mom, Jessica, you're not answering. Did you even go? Margaret stared at the messages. Behind her eyes, she saw the dinner table, Jessica's phone, Aunt Patricia's jewelry, Marcus's laugh, Brandon's uncomfortable silence. She saw her daughter at 15, crying because kids at school mocked her thrift store prom dress. Margaret had offered to buy something new, but Jessica had insisted on earning it herself, working summers at the library, proud and stubborn. When had that girl become this woman? Margaret's finger moved across the screen. There was no reservation. But you knew that. 3 dots appeared. Vanished. Appeared again. The phone rang. She answered, Mom. Jessica's voice carried manufactured surprise. What are you talking about? I made that reservation myself. The spa says it was cancelled 3 weeks ago. The deposit was refunded to your credit card. Silence stretched between them like frozen rope. Mom, there must be some mistake. I would never, Jessica. Margaret's voice cut clean. Don't, more silence. Then Jessica's tone shifted, something brittle and sharp emerging. You know what? Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I cancelled it. Because I'm tired, Mom. I'm tired of you embarrassing me. I'm tired of you pretending your little librarian life is some noble calling when it's just an excuse to stay small. I'm tired of people pitching me because my mother drives a car held together with duct tape. I see. Do you? Do you really? Because from where I'm sitting, you've spent my entire life choosing poverty over pride. Dad left you money. The patents, the investments, I know about those, I'm not stupid. But you'd rather play saint than actually be someone. Margaret felt something crack inside her chest, clean as breaking ice. Someone like you, someone successful. Someone people respect. Not some charity case Brandon has to offer jobs to out of pity, and the spa humiliation? That was meant to teach me what exactly? Jessica's laugh came harsh. You can't humiliate someone who has no shame. I thought maybe if you felt what I've felt for 30 years, showing up places and not belonging, you'd finally understand. But you don't, do you? You think your little literacy programs and your volunteer work make you better than us. I've never thought I was better than anyone. That's worse, Mom. That's so much worse. You think you're too humble to compete, but really you're just too scared. At least I'm honest about wanting success. Margaret closed her eyes. I hope it makes you happy, sweetheart. Don't call me that. Don't do your martyred mother routine. Jessica's voice cracked. You had every advantage and you chose nothing. And now you want me to feel guilty for choosing everything? For building something? For matter to people? I love you, Jessica. The line went dead. Margaret sat in the parking lot watching afternoon shoppers load groceries into sensible sedans and oversized SUVs. A young mother struggled with a toddler and a collapsing paper bag. Margaret got out, helped gather the spilled oranges, accepted breathless thanks. The mother's eyes were kind. She didn't know Margaret's name, didn't know about the patents or the foundation or the cancelled spa reservation. She just saw someone helping. Margaret drove home. The fog had burned off, leaving everything sharp-edged and bright. She thought about David Morrison asking her to coffee, about Carlos reading to his daughter, about the new children's wing at the library that would open next spring with computers and reading nooks and 1,000 books donated anonymously. She thought about Jessica at 15. Working summers to afford a prom dress, determined and fierce. Somewhere between that girl and this woman, something had calcified. Margaret couldn't fix it. Couldn't force her daughter to value what she valued. Could only decide what came next. At home, she changed into comfortable clothes, yoga pants Jessica would mock, a cardigan with stretched cuffs, house slippers worn soft. She made tea and sat at her kitchen table with the filing cabinet folders spread before her. Outside, Mrs. Kowalski's cat dozed in a patch of sunlight. Margaret opened her laptop and began typing. The email went to her lawyer first. Robert and I always intended the bulk of our estate for charitable purposes. I'd like to accelerate the timeline. Please prepare the paperwork for the following distributions. She listed the amounts and recipients: literacy programs, library expansions, scholarship funds for first-generation college students, housing assistance for low-income families. $42 million, allocated carefully over the next 5 years. What remained would go to Jessica and Marcus in equal shares, along with detailed letters explaining the choices she'd made, not because they deserved punishment. Because they deserved truth. She hit send and felt lighter. Her phone buzzed. Not Jessica this time. David Morrison. Couldn't wait until Tuesday. Dinner tonight? My treat. No pressure. Margaret smiled at the screen, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest. She typed, yes. But I'm paying. And I'm wearing my librarian cardigan. David, I'm counting on it. She stood and moved to the window, looking out at the ordinary street with its ordinary houses and ordinary lives. No one here knew about the $47 million or the semiconductor patents or the daughter who'd tried to humiliate her. They knew Margaret, who brought cookies to block parties and helped jumpstart dead car batteries and listened when people needed listening. That was enough. That had always been enough. Her phone buzzed again. Jessica's name appeared. Margaret let it ring through to voicemail. Then deleted the message without listening. Not from spite. From clarity. Some bridges you burned. Some you simply stopped maintaining. She had coffee to look forward to, literacy programs to fund, a man with kind eyes and silver hair who quoted Neruda and thought municipal bonds could be romantic. She had Carlos learning to read and Mrs. Kowalski's anonymous mortgage relief and a library full of people who knew her name and meant it kindly. Jessica had her Instagram followers and designer clothes and the hollow comfort of surfaces that gleamed but revealed nothing. Margaret had tried for 30 years to show her daughter a different way. You couldn't force someone to see what they'd decided was invisible. But you could choose what you built with your own hands. Margaret returned to the table, to the folders and documents, to the careful architecture of legacy. Through the window, afternoon light painted everything gold. In 3 hours she'd meet David for dinner. In 3 days, the Literacy Center would receive an anonymous donation large enough to expand into 3 new locations. In 3 weeks, the library's children's wing would break ground, and tomorrow, Jessica would wake up in her palatial home, surrounded by expensive things, still searching for whatever it was she thought success looked like. Margaret hoped she found it. Genuinely hoped it, the way you hoped for strangers at bus stops and students taking tests and daughters who'd grown into people you barely recognized. But hoping didn't require participating in the search. She closed her laptop, finished her tea, and went to shower before dinner. The mirror showed her the same face, silver-threaded hair, crow's feet, the ordinary features of an ordinary woman who'd chosen ordinary kindness over extraordinary display. She smiled at her reflection and meant it. Outside, the fog began rolling back in, soft and gray and gentle, covering everything in comfortable obscurity. Margaret dressed carefully, not the Tory Burch, but a simple blue dress Robert had loved, pearl earrings that had been her mother's, the cardigan with the stretched cuffs because comfort mattered more than appearance. She was ready. For dinner, for coffee, for whatever came next, for the life she'd chosen and would keep choosing, despite the daughters who couldn't understand it and the families who couldn't see it and the world that measured everything wrong. She locked the door behind her and drove toward the restaurant, toward David Morrison and possibility, toward all the quiet victories that would never trend on Instagram but mattered more than anything that did. The Civic's engine rattled. The fog thickened. Margaret kept driving, steady and sure, into the gray and gold evening. The holographic invitation materialized above Margaret Chen's kitchen table at 6:43 on a Tuesday morning, projecting Jessica's face in 3 dimensions of calculated perfection. Her daughter's smile had been retouched, Margaret noted, the laugh lines digitally smoothed, the teeth whitened beyond biology's capable range. The audio began automatically, Jessica's voice pitched in that particular register influencers used, breathy and intimate despite addressing thousands. Mom, I know you hate these things, but this one's important. Brandon's receiving the Innovator's Legacy Award at the Tech Titans Gala Saturday night. Black tie, Quantum Pavilion, 7 o'clock. I've already programmed your smart car with the route. Please try to look presentable. Love you. The hologram dissolved into pixels, leaving Margaret alone with her coffee and the familiar weight of her daughter's disappointment. Through the window, riverside streets flickered with embedded LED sidewalks, each panel displaying targeted advertisements as pedestrians passed. Mrs. Kowalski shuffled by, her biometric signature triggering ads for arthritis medication and cemetery plots. The old woman ignored them with practiced determination. Margaret's personal device, an older model, 3 generations behind current, vibrated against the recycled bamboo table. Text from Jessica appeared on the screen, no hologram this time, sending you a stylist. She'll be there Friday at 2. Don't argue. This matters to me, Margaret typed back, I'll be at work until 5. 3 dots appeared, pulsed, vanished. Then, Mom. Seriously? Can't you take one afternoon off from shelving books? The response formed in Margaret's mind, I don't shelve books, I direct community programs with a $7 million annual budget, but she deleted it unsent. Some truths only widened the distance. She finished her coffee and walked to the garage where her 2042 Honda Civic waited, its paint job showing rust spots the newer model's self-healing polymers would have erased. The car started with a mechanical rumble that felt honest compared to the silent glide of electric vehicles. Robert had died in this car, technically, slumped over the wheel in their driveway, heart attack swift and final. She'd kept driving it anyway. Some people called that morbid. Margaret called it remembering. The commute to Riverside Public Library took 23 minutes through traffic that flowed according to algorithms she'd never understand. Around her, vehicles communicated with each other in streams of data, adjusting speed and trajectory in real-time choreography. Her Civic had no such capabilities. She drove manually, hands on the wheel, making decisions with human hesitation and human error. Tom waited at the library's entrance, his security uniform pressed sharp despite being 15 years old. The newer uniforms came with embedded sensors and automatic climate control, but Tom preferred what he knew. Morning, Ms. Chen. You're early again, habit, Tom. He held the door while she entered the library's cool dimness. The building dated from 2028, before smart buildings became standard. No walls that adjusted transparency based on privacy needs, no floors that heated or cooled according to foot traffic patterns. Just concrete and steel and the particular smell of books mixing with cleaning solution and the accumulated breath of thousands of readers. Margaret climbed the stairs to the administrative offices. Past the circulation desk were morning volunteers prepared for opening. Her name appeared on the door in simple letters, Margaret Chen, Director of Community Development. She unlocked it with an actual physical key. Inside, her office reflected calculated modesty. 2 monitors instead of the holographic displays standard in modern workplaces. Furniture from the previous decade. Windows that required manual opening. On the bookshelf, first editions mixed with library sales finds, their value invisible to casual observers. The filing cabinet in the corner held the only lock that mattered, biometric, military grade, containing documents that would make her daughter's gala look like a neighborhood barbecue. Her calendar displayed the day's architecture: 9 o'clock meeting with literacy program coordinators, 11 o'clock call with the foundation board, 1 o'clock tour of the new children's wing construction site, 3 o'clock tutoring session with Carlos. Normal hours filled with work that felt like breathing. The meeting at 9 brought faces she'd known for years, teachers, volunteers, community organizers who understood that literacy was infrastructure. They discussed funding allocations, program expansions, the persistent problem of adult learners too ashamed to ask for help. Margaret listened more than she spoke, taking notes in actual handwriting while others typed on tablets that would auto-transcribe and analyze sentiment. At 11, she joined the foundation board call via video conference. 8 faces appeared on her screen, none of them knowing she funded their salaries. The executive director, Martin Torres, led discussion of scholarship distributions for the next quarter. Margaret had opinions about every line item but voiced only strategic questions, nudging without commanding. What about vocational programs, she asked. Everyone focuses on 4-year degrees, but we're seeing demand for technical certifications. Martin's face brightened. Actually, we received an anonymous donation last week specifically designated for trade school scholarships. 50,000. If we could identify the donor. I'd love to thank them personally, Margaret smiled into her camera. Sometimes anonymity is part of the gift. The construction site at 1 o'clock showed steel framing rising against gray sky. The children's wing would triple capacity, add maker spaces with 3D printers and coding stations, create reading nooks designed by child psychologists. Margaret walked through with the project manager, her shoes collecting mud that clung like obligation. We're on schedule, the manager said, consulting his tablet. Barring complications, we'll open next spring. The donors really made something special possible here. They'd be pleased to hear it, Margaret said. At 3, Carlos arrived at the literacy center with Charlotte's Web clutched in hands that trembled slightly. He was 46, worked double shifts as a janitor, and had spent 30 years hiding the fact that words defeated him. Now he read slowly, finger-tracing lines, voice stumbling over syllables with the determination of someone climbing mountains. This part, he said, pointing. Where Charlotte Dies. I read it to my daughter last night. We both cried. Margaret felt something warm expand in her chest. That's the book doing its job. Making you feel. I never knew, Carlos said. I never knew what I was missing. All these years, after he left, Margaret sat in the empty tutoring room listening to the building's sounds, footsteps above, the distant beep of self-checkout machines. Voices negotiating which books to borrow. Her device buzzed. Jessica again, Mom, call me. Need to discuss Saturday. It's important, Margaret dialed. Jessica answered on the first ring, her face filling the screen with high-definition concern. Mom. Thank God. Listen, about Saturday, I received the invitation, right, but there's more. Brandon's being honored, but it's also, Jessica's eyes shifted, that tell she'd had since childhood when preparing to ask for something. It's also a family showcase. His parents will be there, Marcus obviously, Aunt Patricia. Everyone who matters in tech is coming. And Brandon's company just went public. Do you know what that means? He's very successful? Congratulations, Mom. Jessica's voice carried that edge, frustration sharpening consonants. It means we're worth $400 million on paper. $400 million. And his parents keep asking about you. About why you never come to things. About why you still work at a library when you could. She stopped. Could what? Could do anything. Be anyone. Instead of this small life you insist on living. Margaret looked at her reflection in the device's black border. 58 years old, gray threading through hair she'd stopped coloring, crow's feet mapping every late night spent reading grant proposals. Small life. As if size could be measured in dollars. I'll be there Saturday, Margaret said. I'll dress appropriately, the stylist, Mom. Please let her come. It's not charity, it's just, we want you to feel comfortable. I'm always comfortable. Jessica's laugh came sharp. That's the problem. You're comfortable in clothes from the recycling economy and shoes held together with actual glue. Just this once, let someone help you look like you belong. The call ended before Margaret could respond. She sat holding the device, its screen gone dark, seeing her daughter's face in memory, Jessica at 6, reading her first chapter book alone. Jessica at 12, furious that classmates mocked her thrift store backpack. Jessica at 25. Announcing her engagement to Brandon Whitmore with defiance and triumph mixed equally in her voice. Somewhere between those moments, love had curdled into something else. Not hate, hate would be cleaner. This felt like disappointment so deep it had calcified into bone. Margaret drove home through evening traffic, the Civic's engine making sounds no algorithm could predict. Her house waited in modest darkness, purchased outright 15 years ago for cash, never upgraded with smart systems that would monitor her movements and adjust accordingly. She unlocked the door with a physical key and entered space that smelled like books and the jasmine tea she drank every evening. The filing cabinet waited. She opened it with her thumbprint, pulling files that represented a life Jessica couldn't imagine. Chun Rodriguez patent portfolio, showing licensing agreements worth millions annually. Foundation documents displaying assets that had grown from $40 million to $72 million through careful investment. Property deeds for buildings she owned but never visited, including the Riverside Library itself, leased to the city for $1 per year. Her device buzzed. David Morrison this time, his message appearing in simple text. Library board meeting next Tuesday. Looking forward to your thoughts on the digital inclusion proposal. Also wondering if you'd consider dinner afterward. Nothing official. Just two people who both care about the Oxford comma. Margaret smiled at the screen, feeling something flutter that she'd thought long dead. David Morrison, chief of staff to the mayor, silver-haired and sharp-minded, who'd been attending board meetings for 3 years with increasing enthusiasm that seemed only partly related to municipal policy. They'd never discussed anything beyond professional matters, but his messages lately carried subtext like coded signals. She typed, "Dinner sounds nice. But I'm paying." His response came quickly, "I was raised in the Midwest. My mother would haunt me. How about we split it like reasonable adults, deal? See you Tuesday." She set the device down and moved to her closet, past the practical clothes Jessica mocked, reaching for the locked garment bag and back. Inside, a dress from 2038, Dior's final collection before the house went fully virtual. Deep blue silk, elegantly simple, expensive in ways that whispered rather than shouted. Robert had bought it for their anniversary, 3 months before his heart decided to stop. She'd worn it once, to his funeral, then never again. Margaret held the dress against her body, studying her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked tired, ordinary, exactly the kind of person who'd be dismissed at a tech titans gala. Good. Underestimation was a weapon people handed you freely. Her device buzzed again. Marcus this time, Mom, Jessica told me about Saturday. I'll be there. Looking forward to catching up, Margaret didn't respond immediately. Marcus, her son, 2 years younger than Jessica and somehow even more lost. Corporate lawyer at a firm that defended companies against environmental lawsuits. He'd stopped visiting 3 years ago, after she'd asked too many questions about his work, about the ethics of defending polluters for profit. She typed, "See you then." Friday arrived with the stylist, a woman named Sienna who materialized at Margaret's door at 2 o'clock sharp despite Margaret's explicit statement she'd be at work. The woman held a portable wardrobe system, racks that unfolded into a mini boutique, screens displaying outfit combinations, a makeup station that analyzed skin tone and suggested corrections. "Ms. Chen? Jessica sent me." "Oh honey, we have so much work to do." Margaret had come home early, a concession that tasted like defeat. "I have appropriate clothing." Sienna's smile held professional sympathy. "Jessica wants you to feel special tomorrow. She's paid for the full treatment, wardrobe consultation, hair, makeup, jewelry selection. This is a gift I don't need, Ms. Chen." Sienna's voice softened. "Between us? I've been styling Jessica for 2 years. I know the family dynamics. I know she can be." She searched for words. "Particular. But she does love you. She just wants you to feel confident tomorrow." Margaret felt something crack inside her chest. This stranger, hired by her daughter, offering the kind of generous interpretation Margaret herself could barely muster. "Show me what you brought." 3 hours later, Margaret stood in her bedroom wearing clothes that cost more than her car. Sienna had bypassed obvious luxury for something subtler, a charcoal suit with perfect tailoring. Silk blouse the color of smoke, shoes that looked modest but carried designer weight. Her hair had been cut and styled, gray streaks highlighted rather than hidden. Makeup emphasized rather than transformed. She looked, Margaret realized, powerful. Like someone who'd chosen simplicity rather than someone who couldn't afford complexity. Sienna packed her equipment with satisfaction. "Jessica will be thrilled. You look distinguished." After the stylist left, Margaret stood before her mirror examining the stranger reflected there. This version of herself could attend galas, command boardrooms, sit across from Brandon's parents without flinching. But it was costume, armor for a battle she hadn't chosen. Her device buzzed. David Morrison, excited for Tuesday. "Fair warning, I've been researching good restaurants for 2 weeks. This might be the most prepared I've been for anything since my dissertation defense." Margaret typed back, "Pressure's on me now. Should I prepare talking points? Only if they involve your thoughts on Neruda." "I've been wondering about that quote from the budget meeting for 3 years." She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "It's a date, then." Saturday morning arrived cold and gray, fog rolling through Riverside streets like smoke from distant fires. Margaret dressed slowly, each piece of Sienna's chosen outfit feeling like armor being donned. The suit fit perfectly. The shoes added height without discomfort. Her reflection showed a woman who belonged at events like Tech Titans galas. Her device buzzed. "Jessica, cars outside. Automated route to Quantum Pavilion. See you there. Please don't embarrass me." The last line landed like a fist. "Please don't embarrass me." As if Margaret's entire existence was an ongoing humiliation Jessica had to manage, she grabbed her clutch, simple black, containing only essentials, and walked to where a sleek automated vehicle waited, its doors opening at her approach. The interior smelled new, everything leather and electronics and money. She sat, and the car pulled away from her modest house without her touching any controls. The drive took 40 minutes through streets increasingly affluent. Buildings grew taller, cleaner, studded with advertisements that shifted based on passing demographics. Margaret's biometrics triggered ads for retirement planning and senior living facilities. She ignored them, watching the city transform from practical to aspirational. Quantum Pavilion rose against gray sky like a crystal grove, all transparent walls and floating levels held by engineering that looked like magic. Vehicles lined up at the entrance, depositing passengers in evening wear that collectively cost more than Margaret's house. She watched couples emerge, their clothing embedded with subtle tech, fabrics that shifted color. Jewelry that displayed changing holograms, accessories that broadcast wealth in frequencies only the rich could parse. Her car stopped. The door opened. Margaret stepped out onto red carpet that felt wrong under her feet, like walking on expectations made physical. A young man with a tablet appeared. "Name please?" "Margaret Chen." "Guest of Jessica Chen Whitmore." He tapped, frowned, tapped again. "I don't see you on the list." Margaret felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Check again." Jessica sent the car, more tapping. The man's expression shifted to professional embarrassment. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. You're not showing in our system. Without registration." "I can't, Brandon Whitmore is receiving an award." "I'm his mother-in-law." The man's face reddened. "Let me get my supervisor." Margaret stood on red carpet while others flowed past, their glances assessing her value in nanoseconds, finding her wanting despite Sienna's expensive armor. Minutes stretched. The supervisor appeared, older, more polished, carrying the same tablet like a shield. "Ms. Chen, I apologize for the confusion. It appears your registration was cancelled yesterday afternoon." By, he checked his screen, Jessica Chen Whitmore. The world tilted slightly. Margaret heard herself say, "There must be some mistake, I'm showing the cancellation here. Perhaps if you contact Mrs. Whitmore directly." Margaret pulled out her device with hands that had forgotten how to stay steady. She called Jessica. It rang through to voicemail. She called again. Same result. Around her, guests continued arriving, parting around her like water around stone. She called Marcus. Voicemail. She stood on red carpet outside Quantum Pavilion while her family celebrated inside, and understood with perfect clarity that this was intentional. Her device buzzed. Text from Jessica, "Sorry Mom. Couldn't risk you embarrassing us tonight. This is for the best. Car will take you home." Margaret stared at the words until they stopped meaning anything. Then she became aware of someone watching, a woman emerging from a vehicle. Mid-40s, elegant in emerald silk, her face familiar in ways Margaret couldn't immediately place. The woman approached. "Margaret Chen." Margaret nodded, voice gone. "I'm Veronica Hastings. You don't remember me, but 15 years ago you paid for my master's degree. Anonymous scholarship through Friends of the Library. I worked spa reception to support my daughter while studying. You changed my entire life." The red carpet, the pavilion, the humiliation, all of it receded slightly. "Veronica. I remember your application essay. You wrote about building sanctuaries." Veronica's smile blazed. "I own 3 luxury wellness properties now. Including the spa where your daughter tried to humiliate you last month." Sophie told me everything. Margaret felt reality shift. "You know about, I know you're standing outside this gala because your daughter cancelled your registration. I know she's been systematically trying to embarrass you into becoming someone you're not. And I know," Veronica pulled out her device, "that she's about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating saints." She made 3 calls in rapid succession, each conversation brief and electric. Then she turned to Margaret with eyes that held something fierce and loving. "We're going in. Through my entrance. As my personal guest. And before this night ends, everyone in that building will know exactly who Margaret Chen is." Margaret looked at this woman she'd helped years ago, now returned wielding power like a sword drawn in her defense, and felt something old and tired inside her begin to crack open. Veronica, you don't have to, Ms. Chen. Margaret. You gave me a future when I had none. Tonight I'm giving you something better. I'm giving you justice. Are you ready? Margaret thought of Jessica inside, celebrating her husband's success while leaving her mother outside like discarded trash. She thought of Marcus ignoring her calls. She thought of Aunt Patricia and Brandon's parents and everyone who'd ever measured her life as small. She thought of David Morrison researching restaurants for their date. Of Carlos reading to his daughter, of the $72 million in anonymous goods she'd quietly accomplished. She met Veronica's eyes and said, "I'm ready." They walked together toward a side entrance, Margaret's heart pounding with something that felt remarkably like anticipation, while inside Quantum Pavilion, her daughter celebrated, unaware that the evening was about to become very different than planned. The automated vehicle deposited Margaret at Quantum Pavilion's service. Entrance at 6:47, 17 minutes before the gala's official start. She'd reprogrammed the route herself after Jessica's car had tried routing her to the main entrance, some maternal instinct whispering that tonight required strategic positioning. The alley smelled like expensive catering and nervous kitchen staff, steam rising from ventilation grates and clouds that caught the building's embedded lighting and glowed phosphorescent blue. Margaret stepped out wearing Sienna's carefully chosen armor, her reflection ghosting across the vehicle's tinted windows before it glided away. The charcoal suit fit like it understood her body's architecture. The shoes added 3 inches but felt stable, engineered for women who needed to stand their ground. Her clutch contained her outdated device, a lipstick she'd probably never reapply, and a biometric keycard that accessed bank accounts Jessica didn't know existed. A young man in kitchen whites emerged for a smoke break, saw her standing there, and froze with his vape pen halfway to his lips. "You lost, ma'am?" "Guest entrance is around front, not lost," Margaret said. Just taking the long way, she walked past him toward the service corridor, where the sounds of the gala filtered through walls that cost more per square foot than most people's houses. Laughter with algorithmic precision, the kind that happened when social media analytics suggested optimal engagement. Music that had been composed by AI trained on 1,000 successful events. The clink of glasses containing wine whose vintage was verified by blockchain. Margaret's device buzzed. Text from Jessica, "Mom, where are you? You're not answering. Please tell me you're not backing out." She stared at the message, her daughter's concern so perfectly calibrated it could have been generated by sentiment analysis software. "Please tell me you're not backing out. Not please tell me you're safe, or I'm worried about you, or I made a terrible mistake canceling your registration and I'm sorry." Just the fear that Margaret might embarrass her through absence. Margaret didn't respond. She followed the service corridor past kitchen chaos, chefs shouting instructions in 3 languages, servers balancing trays with mechanical precision, the sharp smell of reduction sauces and human stress. A woman in her 50s, Latina, wearing the same server uniform everyone else wore, looked up from arranging canapes and met Margaret's eyes. Recognition flickered. "Ms. Chen," Margaret stopped. The woman's face assembled itself from memory. Rosa, from the adult literacy program, 3 years ago, determined to pass her citizenship test at age 52 despite English being her 4th language. "Rosa." Margaret's smile came genuine and warm. "You work here, part-time? Catering events?" "My daughter, she's at UC Berkeley now." Rosa's voice carried pride that needed no translation. "She got that scholarship. The anonymous one." Through the library, Margaret felt her throat tighten. "I heard about that program. They help good students, they help students nobody else sees." Rosa touched Margaret's arm. "You going to the party? You look very beautiful. Like you belong with fancy people." "I'm not sure where I belong tonight." Rosa studied her with the particular wisdom of women who'd survived immigration, poverty, and the persistent assumption they were invisible. "You belong wherever you decide to be, Ms. Chen. That's what you taught me. Nobody gets to tell you your worth." A supervisor called Rosa's name. She squeezed Margaret's hand once and returned to her canapes, leaving Margaret standing in a service corridor feeling more seen than she'd felt in months. Margaret continued toward the main ballroom. The corridor opened into a staging area where servers assembled before entering the event space. Through glass panels, she could see Quantum Pavilion's interior, a cathedral of modern wealth where transparent floors stacked 3 levels high, each one visible to the others, turning attendance into performance. Holographic displays floated midair showing Brandon Whitmore's professional accomplishments rendered in light and data. The Tech Titans Award, an actual physical trophy wrapped in augmented reality overlays, rotated on a pedestal that probably cost more than Rose's annual salary. Jessica stood near the trophy in a dress that shifted colors based on ambient lighting, Morpheus silk. Margaret recognized it from the ads that targeted her demographic with promises of age-appropriate glamour. Her daughter looked perfect. Practiced perfect. Instagram perfect. She was laughing at something Brandon's father said, her hand on Brandon's arm, performing the role of successful wife with the dedication of someone who'd studied the part for years. Marcus stood nearby in a suit that announced his salary through fabric technology Margaret didn't understand but recognized as expensive. He held a champagne flute and nodded while a circle of tech executives discussed market valuations, his lawyer training making him fluent in the language of money without necessarily believing in its grammar. Aunt Patricia occupied a settee near the bar, dripping in jewelry that broadcast her husband's net worth through sheer accumulated carats. She was holding court with Brandon's mother, 2 women who'd married wealth comparing notes on the best way to manage hired help and difficult relatives. Margaret watched her family through glass, feeling like an anthropologist studying a tribe she'd once belonged to. Or had she? Looking back, she couldn't remember ever fitting seamlessly into their world of conspicuous consumption and calculated status. Even when Robert was alive, even when she could have afforded any of this, something in her had resisted. Not from moral superiority, though Jessica would claim that's what it was, but from a fundamental misalignment of values. Like trying to read a book in a language you'd never quite learned, her device buzzed again. Jessica, insistent, MOM. I can see you're reading these. Carr says it dropped you off 15 minutes ago. Where are you? Margaret typed back, I'm here. Just making my entrance. She pushed through the service door into the ballroom. The temperature changed immediately, climate controlled to exactly 71 degrees, the optimal temperature for luxury events according to hospitality analytics. The air smelled like expensive perfume and the particular scent of wealth, which Margaret had learned was actually the absence of smell, everything carefully filtered and purified until nothing offensive remained. A server glided past with champagne. Margaret took a glass she wouldn't drink and moved along the ballroom's perimeter, watching. The crowd flowed in patterns determined by status and social connection, small clusters forming and reforming like cells dividing. Name badges floated above each guest as holographic tags, names, companies, net worth displayed for anyone wearing augmented reality contacts. Margaret didn't have contacts. She preferred seeing people without their financial information hovering over their heads like halos or warning signs. She spotted David Morrison across the room, his silver hair catching light, deep in conversation with the mayor. He wore a classic tuxedo that rejected trend in favor of timelessness. As if sensing her attention, he looked up. Their eyes met across 50 feet of wealthy strangers. He smiled, not the practiced smile of social performance, but something warm and specifically meant for her. Margaret felt heat rise up her neck. She looked away, flustered, and found herself face to face with Brandon's mother. Catherine Whitmore stood like a monument to successful aging, 70 years old and surgically refined until she looked 50, wearing diamonds that required their own insurance policy. Her smile activated with the warmth of a refrigerator light turning on when the door opened. Margaret. How unexpected. Catherine's eyes traveled over Margaret's outfit with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating investments. That's quite a suit. Rental, gift from Jessica, how thoughtful of her. She's always trying to help you. Catherine's tone suggested this was exhausting charity work. Though I suppose at your age, comfort matters more than style. Margaret sipped champagne she didn't want, tasting expensive grapes and casual cruelty. At my age, I've learned that people who confuse price with value usually can't afford either. Catherine's smile froze. Before she could respond, Jessica materialized like an anxiety attack wearing designer heels. Mom. There you are. I've been texting. Jessica stopped, registering her mother's outfit, her expression cycling through surprise, approval, and something that looked like relief. "You actually wore the sienna clothes. Wow. You look really good, thank you, sweetheart." Jessica leaned in, voice dropping. "Listen, I need to talk to you before, Jessica, darling." Catherine inserted herself between them with the efficiency of someone used to controlling conversations. "Your mother was just telling me about her work at the library. Doing such important book things." Jessica's face did something complicated. "Mom's actually director of community development. It's a significant position, how nice." Catherine's attention had already moved past Margaret like she was furniture. "Jessica, you simply must introduce me to that venture capitalist who funded your husband's last round. The one with the yacht." Jessica glanced at Margaret, something apologetic in her eyes, then followed Catherine toward the cluster of tech money surrounding Brandon. Margaret watched them go, her daughter's shoulders straightening as she shifted into performance mode, becoming the woman these people expected rather than the woman she might have been. That looked painful. David Morrison appeared at Margaret's elbow holding 2 fresh champagne flutes. He handed her one and took her untouched glass. "Catherine Whitmore is like a masterclass in making people feel small while technically being polite. You saw that? I've been watching you since you walked in." "Which sounds creepier than I intended." David's smile turned self-deprecating. "What I meant is, I notice when you're in a room." Hard not to. Margaret felt that flutter again, the one she'd been trying to ignore since he'd asked her to coffee. "Shouldn't you be networking?" "Isn't that what these events are for? I've been networking for 3 hours. Smiled until my face hurts. Made small talk with people who think public service is what you do when you can't succeed in private sector." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Then you walked in and suddenly this entire tedious evening became interesting, David." "I know. Too forward. You're here for family." "I'm here officially." He glanced toward where the mayor held court. "But later, after the speeches and the award and all the obligatory nonsense, would you let me take you somewhere quiet? Just for coffee. Or something stronger if the evening requires it." Margaret looked at him, really looked. Silver hair she wanted to touch. Eyes that saw past her practical clothes and modest car to something underneath. A man who'd watched her redirect library funding toward immigrant literacy programs and called it brilliant instead of impractical. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Then it's a date." David's hand brushed hers, deliberate but brief. "Try not to let Catherine Whitmore make you feel invisible. Some of us see you very clearly." He moved away before she could respond, leaving Margaret standing alone with her champagne and the particular warmth of being noticed by someone who mattered. The evening proceeded according to the careful choreography of wealthy events. Dinner was served at tables arranged by social algorithm, who needed to sit near whom for optimal networking, whose connections would benefit whose business, which conversations would generate the most value. Margaret found herself at table 17, the furthest from the main stage, seated between a tech journalist who didn't recognize her and a venture capitalist's wife who spent the entire salad course describing her villa in Tuscany without asking a single question about anyone else. Jessica sat at table 1 with Brandon, his parents, and the evening's most important guests. Marcus was at table 4 with the lawyers and advisors. Aunt Patricia commanded table 6. The geography of status mapped clearly as altitude, and Margaret occupied the lowest elevation. She ate duck confit that cost more per bite than most people's meals and listened to conversations that valued disruption over stability, innovation over sustainability, growth over anything resembling human contentment. The journalist beside her was lip-posting the evening, his fingers moving constantly across his device screen, reducing the event to content for consumption by people who couldn't attend but wanted to feel included. Between courses, holographic presentations played above the tables, Brandon's professional journey rendered as inspirational narrative. His college dropout story reframed as bold risk-taking. His first failed startup positioned as crucial learning experience. His current company's success attributed entirely to his vision, with no mention of the engineers who built it or the investors who funded it or the luck of launching at exactly the right moment in exactly the right market. Margaret watched her son-in-law accept praise with practiced humility that wasn't actually humble, and wondered what it cost him to perform this version of himself. Did he remember the person he'd been before the money? Did that person still exist underneath the tailored suit and algorithmic confidence? The award presentation began at 9:30. The Tech Titans board chair, a woman who'd built an empire on social media analytics and now spent her time deciding which other wealthy people deserved recognition, took the stage. Tonight we honor someone who embodies the spirit of innovation that defines our industry. Someone who saw a problem and built a solution. Someone who disrupted an entire sector and created value where none existed before. Margaret translated the euphemisms automatically. Disrupted meant displaced workers. Created value meant extracted profit. Built a solution meant automated away human jobs and called it progress. Brandon Whitmore's company, Synapse Flow, has revolutionized how we think about cognitive enhancement. His neural interface technology is being used by Fortune 500 companies to increase employee productivity, by universities to accelerate learning, by individuals seeking to maximize their potential. The audience applauded. Margaret clapped politely, remembering the early conversations with Brandon at family dinners where he'd excitedly described technology that could help people with cognitive disabilities. When had that mission become about making already privileged people more productive? When had assistance become enhancement? When had helping become exploiting? Brandon took the stage, the trophy in his hands glowing with embedded LEDs that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, a technological flourish that cost more than most people earned in months. His acceptance speech hit all the expected notes: gratitude, humility, vision for the future. He thanked his team, his investors, his family, my wife Jessica, who believed in me when I was just a kid with an idea and a laptop. My brother-in-law Marcus, whose legal expertise helped us navigate impossible waters. My parents, who taught me that success means lifting others up. He didn't mention Margaret. Not even a thank you to my mother-in-law for coming. She sat at table 17, invisible as furniture, and felt nothing. Or told herself she felt nothing. The truth lived somewhere in the space between nothing and everything, in the particular ache of being deliberately unseen by people who'd once claimed to value family above all else. The speech concluded. Applause erupted. Brandon raised the trophy while cameras captured the moment from 17 angles, creating content that would be shared, liked, commented upon, reduced to metrics that measured everything except what mattered. Jessica stood, tears streaming down her face, hugging her husband. The display felt genuine and performed simultaneously, emotion real enough to satisfy but controlled enough to photograph well. Margaret watched her daughter and felt the familiar mix of love and loss that came from raising someone who'd grown into a stranger. The journalist beside Margaret typed rapidly. This is great content. Real American success story. You know them personally? The award winner is my son-in-law. The journalist's fingers stopped. He looked at Margaret with sudden interest. Really? You're Brandon Whitmore's mother-in-law? Why aren't you sitting up front? I prefer the view from here, huh? He resumed typing. That's actually an interesting angle. The humble mother-in-law staying in the background while her daughter's husband gets honored. Very wholesome. Mind if I quote you? I mind very much. After dinner, the event shifted into networking mode, clusters forming and reforming as people pursued connections that might prove valuable. Margaret moved along the ballroom's edges like a ghost, watching her family perform their roles. Jessica laughed with tech wives, comparing vacation homes and charity boards. Marcus discussed merger strategies with corporate lawyers. Aunt Patricia held court describing her recent art acquisition. None of them looked for Margaret. None of them seemed to notice her absence from their circles. She'd become the uncomfortable relative kept at distance, visible enough to claim family connection but separate enough to avoid association. David found her on the terrace, where Quantum Pavilion's third level opened to night air kept warm by climate generators. The city spread below them, lights mapping inequality in bright clusters and dark gaps. You looked like you needed rescuing. David said, I don't need rescuing. Just air, fair distinction. He leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that she felt his warmth. That was quite a speech. Brandon's very good at saying words that sound meaningful without committing to anything specific. Margaret laughed, surprised by his directness. That's uncharitable, that's accurate. I've been in politics long enough to recognize when someone's optimized their language for maximum approval while minimum accountability. He glanced at her. Does it bother you? That he didn't mention you, should it? Most people would say yes. But you're not most people. David shifted, and now his shoulder brushed hers. Deliberate contact that sent electricity through her nervous system. You're the person who quotes Neruda at budget meetings. Who fights for funding that benefits people who'll never know your name? Who measures success differently than everyone in that room? Margaret turned to face him. How do you know how I measure success? Because I've watched you for 3 years. Seen you advocate for programs with no personal benefit. Seen you defend budgets that help strangers. Seen you light up when discussing literacy rates like other people light up discussing profits. His hand found hers on the railing, covering it. And because I recognize someone living according to principles instead of profits. Takes one to know one. The city's lights blurred slightly. Margaret blinked, surprised by tears she refused to let fall. This evening has been awful, clarifying, good word for it. David's thumb moved across her knuckles, a small gesture that felt enormous. Want to leave? Skip the rest of this performance? We could go somewhere real. Somewhere people don't measure each other's value based on market capitalization. Margaret looked back through the glass walls at the gala continuing its choreographed celebration. Jessica was posing for photos with Brandon. Marcus was networking aggressively. Aunt Patricia was laughing too loudly at something someone said. Her family, occupied with their performance, wouldn't notice her absence. Yes, she said. Let's go somewhere real. They took the service elevator down, passing Rosa still arranging canapes. Who winked at Margaret like she knew exactly what was happening. David's hand stayed at Margaret's lower back as they walked through the kitchen, past the chaos of wealth creation, out into the alley where her practical Civic waited because she'd reprogrammed the automated return time. David stopped. Stared. That's your car? Is that a problem? That's the least problematic thing I've encountered all evening. He opened the passenger door for her with old-fashioned courtesy that made her stomach flutter. Does it actually drive itself, or is that all you, all me? I never trusted the automated systems. Good instinct. I've seen the code. It's not as smart as it thinks it is. Margaret drove them to a diner on Riverside's edge, the kind of place that served coffee in actual ceramic cups and pie that came from actual baking rather than industrial production. The fluorescent lights hummed. The vinyl booths held the accumulated conversations of 50 years. The waitress, a woman named Betty who'd worked there longer than Margaret had lived in the city, brought coffee without being asked. David added cream and sugar, his movements comfortable and familiar. This is better than the gala, than everything I've experienced in 6 months. He met her eyes across the formica table. Margaret, I need to tell you something, and I'm going to sound like a teenager, but I'm 60 years old and done pretending. Margaret's heart accelerated. Tell me. I've been half in love with you since you explained why municipal libraries were more important than tax incentives for tech companies. That was 2 years ago. I've been fully in love with you since you quoted Charlotte's Web during a budget hearing and made hardened bureaucrats cry. That was 8 months ago. And I've been trying to work up the courage to tell you since then, but you're always so contained, so focused, so clearly complete without needing anyone. He reached across the table, took her hand. But tonight, watching your family ignore you while you sat there beautiful and brilliant and invisible to everyone except me, I can't wait anymore. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to take you to dinner, to coffee, to every boring municipal meeting. I want to argue with you about the Oxford comma. I want to know what you look like when you're not performing competence for people who don't deserve it. Margaret felt tears now, hot and unwelcome and entirely appropriate. I'm 58 years old, I'm 60. We're exactly the right age to know what we want and brave enough to ask for it. I come with complicated family drama. I come with a divorce, 3 grown kids who think I work too much, and strong opinions about library cataloging systems. We all have baggage. The question is whether we're carrying it alone or together. Margaret looked at this man across cheap diner coffee, this man who saw her clearly while her own family looked through her. She thought about the $72 million hidden in filing cabinets. The anonymous scholarships. The quiet good she'd accomplished while her daughter measured success in Instagram followers. She thought about Robert, dead 15 years, who'd want her to choose happiness over loyalty to grief. She squeezed David's hand. Yes to what, specifically? I need clarity here. Yes to dinner. Yes to coffee. Yes to you seeing me and me seeing you back. She smiled, feeling lighter than she'd felt in years. Yes to whatever this becomes. David's grin transformed his face. Margaret Chen, I'm going to court you properly. Starting now. Starting now involves diner coffee at 11 p.m. Starting now involves me being honest that I've wanted to kiss you since you destroyed that budget proposal with pure logic and passion last spring, and I'm asking permission to do that, right here in Betty's fine establishment, with terrible coffee and excellent pie as witnesses. Margaret laughed, real, delighted, completely unself-conscious. Yes, David Morrison. You may kiss me in this diner, he did, leaning across the formica table, his lips warm against hers, tasting like coffee and courage. It was brief and sweet and promised more, and when they pulled apart Margaret felt 17 and 58 simultaneously. Young and old and exactly right, Betty appeared with pie neither of them ordered. On the house. About time someone kissed in here who actually meant it. They ate pie and talked until midnight, discovering shared opinions about library policy and divergent views on whether semicolons were overused, mapping the territory of compatibility through words and silence equally comfortable. Margaret's device buzzed. Multiple messages from Jessica flooding in. Mom, where did you go? Mom, people are asking about you. Mom, you're embarrassing me by disappearing. Mom, call me. Margaret silenced the device and focused on David describing his daughter's recent wedding, his voice warm with love uncomplicated by performance. Tomorrow she'd deal with Jessica. Tomorrow she'd return to her modest house and her filing cabinets full of secrets. Tomorrow she'd continue being invisible to everyone except the people she'd quietly helped. But tonight, in this diner with this man who saw her completely, Margaret Chen felt wealthy beyond any measure her family would understand. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt exactly like herself, no performance required, and that, she thought, taking another bite of pie while David laughed at something she'd said, was worth more than all the tech awards in Silicon Valley combined.